So on a small island like St. Lucia, it's very difficult to isolate crime in one specific spot. So the reality is, the further abroad you go, the more it's just associated generally with St. Lucia. And so we all have to be extremely concerned with the current significant increase in crime wave and its impact on the reputation of St. Lucia. You know, tourists have a choice as to whether they want to come here or not. The rest of us don't. And so those of us who depend heavily on St. Lucia for our income and our livelihood are the ones that ought to be substantially more concerned about what's taking place in the country.
Definitely. And as we actually move into, I guess, convention mode, we see a lot of support for you as leader of the party. Just tell us, how do you feel moving into convention and the shape of the party moving forward?
Look, I feel very strong. I'm just grateful for the support of our party. But the reality, as every single day goes by and as every event occurs, more and more solutions are recognizing and having a better understanding of what building a new St. Lucia was all about. And the success that we had as a government. I mean, leading up to COVID, how we managed COVID, and certainly the plan that we put in place for St. Lucia's recovery is second to none. Second to none. The year immediately after COVID, the economy grew by 12.5%. I believe the pronouncement is that it's going to grow by double digits again this year. And when you look at what's going on in the economy, Cabot, Daher Mall, the hotel at Point Seraphin, the Millennium Highway, the bridge in Cul-de-sac, the water project in View Fort, the 5 schools that we were redoing with CDB, the community centers, the bridges, the infrastructure. And then now you see tourism. So we opened up the doors to tourism, much against the protest of the opposition. Remember, they said that we were the only persons who believed that tourism could recover and that we were crazy. And that early reopening and successful reopening of our borders, we were the fastest growing tourism destination in the Southern Caribbean by far. I think the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Mexico were the only ones that were ahead of us. And that created a foundation, and we saw another significant recovery this year in tourism. So we're not back to the 2019 numbers, but we saw 150,000 increase in arrivals, and that's almost $300 million of revenue that came in. So I'm very proud, and more every day people are recognizing the merits of what we were doing. So those persons who were saying that you can't eat roads, which was to suggest that the government was spending money on infrastructural projects and not helping provide support for people, people now today would appreciate that that was towards the economic recovery of the country. And it was the right thing to do. I genuinely believe that this government was elected on a platform of a conscience, a social conscience. Yet we have not seen that translated in policy. So this year in particular, the government has deliberately and intentionally not absorbed any part of the increase in cost of living, inflation. And the government has insisted on recovering its revenue and maintaining its revenue. Now, if you're going to do that as a policy, to me, that ought to be commensurate with a policy of government of austerity. Where are the sacrifices by this government? Where was the freeze on employment? Where was the stopping of traveling? What were the attempts to be able to preserve revenue, right? So that maybe there would be less of a burden put on to even the more vulnerable people in our society. But what did we see? We saw bread prices go up. We saw bus fares go up. We saw cooking gas go up. And we saw generally the cost of living in this country rise, where the people are the ones who have borne the brunt of what's taken place, and not the government. And that to me is unconscionable. And it's something I keep on saying. Government's balance sheet is easier to recover. But when households suffer a loss of income, here's the big one. We keep on talking about the importance of agriculture as a sector in St. Lucia. But it's even more important because the revenue generated in agriculture tends to be secondary revenue. And it really comes as secondary revenue for the more vulnerable households in St. Lucia. So it's an additional revenue source. So when the banana sector is destroyed, that now undermines our other agricultural sectors. And therefore, it even means that there's less money being made available to the vulnerable society. And there is no safety net. The government has done a piss poor job of trying to cushion the blow of what has been taking place in the country, all at their own expense.
Just one question from me. An opposed political leader, some criticism coming from some quarters is that it was undemocratic and that you continue to surround yourself with party loyalists. What would you make to that criticism?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Okay, your appointment as political leader was unopposed, and some are saying that it was undemocratic, and others are also saying criticism that you continue to surround yourself with loyalists. Any response to that?
No, I mean, the fact is we do have a democratic process. There is a process of nominations, was what happened at the Conference of Delegates. I'm very grateful that the party saw fit that they felt that I'm the best person to lead and the only person to lead at this point. In terms of party loyalists, I want to know that we have people who are genuinely loyal and au courant with the policies and the morality, the ethics of the United Workers' Party. And so we've seen that United Workers' Party has been singularly the best political party in St. Lucia. Whenever there is any form of economic success, social development in this country, it has come when the United Workers' Party is in office. And so those persons who associate themselves to the party and support those values and support rebuilding a new St. Lucia, if they're considered Allan Chastanet loyalists, so be it. But at the end of the day, we want to put together the best slate of people to continue to move this country forward.
We continue to see the Prime Minister mentioning custody suites as, I guess, one of the issues compounding the police's efforts in terms of crime fighting. What do you see to this? Because he continues to lay blame at the past administration for destroying the custody suites, for the compounding the situation that we have now. What do you see to this and other police efforts?
Look, anybody who had been to the custody suites would have understood why the custody suites was taken down. It was deplorable, it was disgusting. In a prime location in St. Lucia. And as he said himself, in the short term, using the police stations that we have, in which they are already manned, is more than sufficient. George Charles was there. If they wanted to have really resolved something immediately, they could have easily taken a portion of the old George Charles School and made it a temporary custody suites, if the needs be. But that's not what's going to solve the crime problem in St. Lucia. The government abandoned border control. The government got rid of the canine dogs. The government has refused to take in pragmatic, proven methods to fight crime in this country. And the government continues to abuse the Constitution of this country. A sacred right is our freedom of movement, our freedom of speech. And this last bill that was passed in the House is deplorable. And that's why we asked for it to be not going through all of its stages, so some of those things could be remedied. How can it be that a constable on his own or her own thought process can put you under house arrest for 3 days and account to no one? How can a constable come into your house and search your house without a warrant? How can a constable stop a road and block a road or block a footpath? Now, Operation Restore Confidence got into problems because of the weak administrative processes within the police force. So when it came for the police force to justify what they had done, there was no evidence. So what you're doing is the opposite. You're now empowering lower-ranking officers and giving them the ability, under the cover of the law, supposedly, to abuse the civil rights of local St. Lucians. And this is crazy. And if you read the bill, it says within or outside of the prescribed area. Right? So this is unheard of. And this is something that we as St. Lucians need to take extremely seriously when our rights are being encroached like this. Again, when we talk about after COVID, the reason why a state of emergency is important. The Constitution contemplates that there's a time in which the state, the government, may have to suppress people's rights. And it gives a method for that to take place. One, it's the Governor General to call a state of emergency. It means you must convince the Governor General that you have a cause. You have to then come to Parliament and get Parliament's approval. there has to be reports. So for instance, every single person that is held in custody or a civil right is taken away from them, it is recorded and it must be put in a report. Okay, so there's accountability by the state to the people of this country. In this current bill, guess who that person is? That person now is the minister. All reports go to the minister. He gets to make all the discretionary decisions, right? And so there is no accountability to the public. And I think that we need to really appreciate that if the Constitution contemplated a suspension or withdrawal of our rights, that it's done in a prescribed way. This government did the same thing during COVID. We had said in our COVID Act, the only element that has and requires a state of emergency is a curfew, because a curfew entails taking away people's right of freedom of movement. They went and they said, no, let's take the CCJ. So under the interpretation that there was an error, there was no need for a referendum. The constitutional review that was put up by them said, let us have a referendum on all things. Something as important as the CCJ. Why was there no referendum? And even now what I see going on with the deputy speaker is fraught with constitutional problems. And it's when they go to implement it in trying to bring somebody from outside the House into the House that they're going to be in breach of our Constitution. So, but this government seems to be immune to that. No matter how many times you accuse them of that, you provide the evidence of it, it's crazy.
Just final question from me, just on the stint of the current Commissioner of Police, how effective do you think this stint will be, given its shortness, for a lack of a better term, and what does this do for the morale of the police as well, given this current situation?
Look, I think it's unfair to put the blame of what's going on any one person. We all have to take responsibility. This has been building for a period of time. And then when we want to play politics, so I heard the Prime Minister say that nobody in his cabinet has been fingered. Really? So what, he needed somebody to come and actually put a hand on the persons that are in consideration, right? We still have not heard from him as to the status of Richard Federick's visa. Why did the US government take away the visa? They had made allegations before that Richard should have lost his visa and he should not be a minister. What's changed? Why? In the case of Ernest Hilaire, it's fraud. All the evidence is there. If you use your office as the High Commissioner and you write a letter to the British government saying that the car belongs to you, but yet the car belonged to your brother, it means he lied. When he transferred money into Tafao Williams' account and then told the British government the car belonged to Tafao Williams, when he knew the car belonged to him, that was a lie. And then when he turned around and put the car in the name of the state, he said to the British government, the car belonged to the state. And that's where the problem is. Now that it becomes a state asset, who gave permission for the car to now be disposed of by the state? When your car came to St. Lucia, you are a returning ambassador entitled to a duty-free car. But the car must belong to you. And there's documentation to suggest, to show that the car was registered in the name of the state. When you open up an account, the Auditor General, not me, not Allan Chastanet, the Auditor General provided a report which showed that there was an account opened up in the UK called the St. Lucia High Commission IMO account, and that no permission was sought to open up the account. That £66,500 from Jufali was transferred in the account. That's in the Auditor General's report. And that money was not reported to the state. The signatories on the account were Jufali as the ambassador and Ernest Hilaire as the High Commissioner. So if the state, it's in the name of the state, but the state didn't know the account existed, who is controlling the account? And yet you say that you want people to be fingered? And there are many more examples.
Just your expectations on the upcoming budget.
I think that the government is going to try to lay claim for whatever successes are in the budget. I mean, the continued economic growth. I saw a significant improvement in the government's expenditures. But as I said, that has come at the expense of the more vulnerable people in our society. That the burden of inflation has been passed on almost 100% to the general public and to small businesses. And what is very apparent is that consumption, which is a critical sector in our society, is dormant. And that's going to have a big impact on how people feel and people's ability to recover. So the state may have recovered this year, but the reality is there are many businesses and individuals in this country who are suffering, and I think that the government is neglecting them. And I think it's very, very unbecoming, very disturbing that we've not seen a commensurate sacrifice by the state as to what's taken place. I mean, I would have rather seen the state improve its financial position by cutting back on its expenditures, rather than making sure that it collected all of the revenue through the taxation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You all why that's so short there?
Yeah.